What do I like most about being an 8 is the notion of not needing to be needed resonates with me. I, like anybody else, of course, prefer to be liked by those around me. But the need to be needed by other people is not something that I feel.
I appreciate the strength of being an 8. 8s don't have a monopoly on strength, of course, but I think we're the most aware of it. It's allowed me to have hard conversations and make difficult choices and do challenging things.
I really do believe things are possible. I do. Even impossible things, even things that other people are like, never gonna happen. I think, yeah, we can do it. I also love being an 8 because of the tender-heartedness that I really believe at least healthy 8s have.
Anger is usually my first response at every situation.
I can say things that create a far bigger wake than I had intended, and the implications of that small wave coming off the back of the boat, that's often what I see, not realizing that by the time that wave hits the shore of other people's experiences or life, it's a much larger wave.
Bold, stamina, and leader.
Tender-hearted, tough on the outside, gooey middle, and persistent.
3 words to describe my experience of an 8 would be ready, fire, aim.
I lead a team of people at work from the front. I do not direct them from behind. I want to be out in front of my team and lead by example.
As a pastor, being an 8 is tricky because on one hand, you can stand up for the people who don't have a voice in a given room, but it can also be hard to be vulnerable. And I, for years, thought I was a really vulnerable person, but came to realize that the things I was sharing of myself were being very strategically deployed. And I was, I'll share this part of myself to make this person feel better or to help them learn this thing that I'm telling them, but I'm not actually giving them access to myself. And so there was a really weird split that I was doing in order to remain in control and invulnerable and to not allow people to see me as weak. That can be tricky when you're working with people and you're scared of sharing yourself with people.
How I knew that I was an 8 is that when we read it and when people heard the description of what an 8 wing 7 is, it described me perfectly to a T.
I actually took the test the first time for my job as a pastor, and I came back as a 9. And as we read through the 9, it didn't really resonate with me. And then I brought it home, and my wife thought that doesn't resonate with her. And then some of my more knowledgeable friends kind of chuckled and said, well, we all know what you are. You're an 8. In fact, you are the 80th 8 to ever 8. The more that we've sort of looked into it and understood the Enneagram, the more I realized that that's probably that 9 wing as I'm getting older that shows more and more. And I find myself in my home context. Some of the 8 doesn't work as well at home. I have 2 kids who are 5 and 3. And they don't necessarily enjoy the 8 as much as they enjoy the 9. And I'm trying to make it all work.
I had always pegged myself as a 7, but once I really started recognizing that the Enneagram describes motivation, it was hard for me to stick with that 7 type because I am not motivated like a 7, and I do like to be in charge and I do like to push things forward. I was reluctant to type myself as an 8. I think I've always had this perception of myself as a super chill, fun person, and letting go of that was hard. But I've since realized that yes, I can be relaxed and I can be fun, but there's always going to be that part of me that's just ready to put her dukes up. And I've made my peace with that.
I can come across as intimidating. I can come across as though I'm upset. I can come across at times even as being hostile, even if I'm not personally feeling any particular emotion at the time. And so I have found that in relationships, I need to be able to say, I'm on board, or I think that's a great idea, or I'm happy. There's nothing going on with me.
What I want people to know about an 8 is that even though anger may be expressed easily, it is rarely towards a person. It's generally about the situation. And once the initial reaction is over, we're good. And we don't hold grudges. And it's just an outburst on that. And we ask for your forgiveness up front.
I've been called bull in china shop. There's no winning with you. You're such a bully. You're so judgmental. You're so condescending. All of those things. Most of us think that we're qualified, not necessarily because we think we've got all the expertise, but because we're fairly confident nobody else thinks they're qualified to do it. And we're like, well, someone should think they're qualified to do it, so I guess I'll go ahead and give it a shot. 8s are so hard on themselves. Like, you can't give me a criticism I haven't already given myself, and you can't ask a question challenging my worth that hasn't already come up deep in that gooey middle. And so if you want to support an 8, give them space to be vulnerable, because we go out to swing and punch at the stuff that needs to be challenged, and we are constantly told that we're too big for the space.
8s seek influence. They are motivated by the desire to have power and impact and take a no-holds-barred approach to life. Because of this, 8s have what some people call executive presence. They can be self-confident, value clarity, and can often be found in leadership positions in their business, family, and social circles. They project strength, and they can help others feel strong as well. At their best, they're able to address injustice, dishonesty, and tension openly and directly. But due to their aggression, they are also easy to fear and dislike. 8s are sometimes confused with counterphobic 6s. Seen from the outside, these two types are hard to tell apart because 6s run towards their fear and can look really aggressive. But the aggression of these 6s comes from their own anxiety and self-protectiveness. And the aggression of 8s comes from an anger towards anything they perceive as hypocrisy or injustice. Contrary to the conflict avoidance of 9s and 2s, 8s relish conflict and at times create it. They thrive on confrontational intimacy. Their delight in attacking, which they perceive as playful, often strikes others as aggressive, but is actually a form of establishing contact and intimacy. 8s enjoy the challenge of being oppositional, and even if they don't verbalize it, their first reactions to new ideas and people and situations are often negative. Fortunately, 8s tend to take the side of the weak and have little tolerance for bullies. This is because they know that within their facade of invulnerability, there is an inner child who is the exact opposite of the strength they outwardly project. Most 8s will show this side of themselves to maybe 2 or 3 people in their lives. When 8s are empowered themselves, their subordinates can feel oppressed or pushed around, while 8s as a rule don't even notice that their behavior frightens others. Despite the potential liability of this approach, well-developed 8s, more than any other type, can have the gift of leading other people to their real potential. As an 8 who was mentored by a healthy 8, I can tell you that's true. 8s are in the gut center with 9s and 1s. The common experience of the gut center is anger, and 8s react to this by expressing their rage openly when provoked. They also live with their guard up so no one can get through their defenses and hurt them. 8s fear being weak and vulnerable and harmed, so they create an image that they are strong and able to prevail no matter what. According to Richard Rohr, biblical 8 types can be found in King David, as well as in a series of female figures in the Hebrew scriptures. There was a period in Israel's history during which there were charismatically gifted and divinely chosen leaders who led their troops against the enemy. One of those judges was Deborah. Another figure is Hannah, the childless woman who brings her son Samuel into the world. When this happens, she sings a song of liberation. She says, "The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble gird on strength." We hear similar notes in Mary's Magnificat. The language of these biblical women becomes powerful, even political, when the future of their children is at stake. To protect the weak, they become combative, strategic, and strong. Another 8 we see in the example of David. He succeeds with Machiavellian skill and a sophisticated use of political marriages in disposing of King Saul, another 8, and gradually obtaining dominion over all of Israel. During his rule, he subjects all the neighboring people and makes Israel a real kingdom. He establishes Jerusalem as the capital, and he seeks to replace the elective monarchy of the past, in which Yahweh himself called the leaders of the people, and turns it into a dynasty. The story of David and Bathsheba sheds a clear light on a part of David's character. 8s like David don't necessarily allow their feelings for justice to stand in the way of their own self-interest. David sends Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, to the front lines of battle to die, and then takes Uriah's widow into David's own harem. The prophet Nathan confronts David in a strategic way. He tells the king of 2 men, one rich and one poor. The rich man had many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little lamb that he raised from infancy. The rich man had a guest and didn't want to kill any of his own herd to feed the traveler. So he took the poor man's lamb and slaughtered it instead. When David hears this story, he flies into a rage and he says, "As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die." To which Nathan says, "You are the man." Now, this is a typical 8 reaction. 8s tend to become aggressive toward others who display a negative trait resembling the one that an 8 unconsciously denies. In our story, the prophet Nathan represents David's true conscience and cuts through the layers of self-deception and excuses in a single stroke. There is no wider pendulum than the examples of 8 found in some fictional or famous people. We have Little Women's Joe March. We have Martin Luther King Jr. and Winston Churchill and Teddy Roosevelt. However, we also have Darth Vader, President Snow from the Hunger Games, and Saddam Hussein. It evens out. We've described 8 in broad brushstrokes, but remember, each Enneagram type contains variations. 8s teach us the value of a fair fight and protecting the vulnerable. Thank God for 8s. Join us tomorrow as we explore our final point on the Enneagram, 9, the peacemaker. In the meantime, check out the resources for 8 we've provided in the Spiritual Adventures newsletter or in the description below. See you tomorrow.